Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and today I want to talk to you if you are somebody who loves food too much. So you feel like your love of food is causing a problem for you, either your mental health or your physical health. Now I'm going to do something I don't normally do at the beginning of my videos, and I'm going to summarize what I'm going to talk about so that you can decide if this video is going to be useful for you. Because let's face it, time is precious and I don't want to waste yours. So to begin with, I'm going to look at this idea of loving food too much and offer some possible reframes. I'm not going to talk you out of your love of food, but I'm just going to suggest that there might be a few other things going on that would be helpful to consider. I'm then going to offer a few tips for you if you're someone who your experience is you love food too much. How are you supposed to make any changes? How are you supposed to balance out with food? And lastly, and most importantly maybe, I'm going to talk about motivation, because if you struggle with disordered eating and you love food and you're hearing that focusing on weight loss causes more disordered eating without the motivation of weight loss, why on earth would you do anything about it? Without having an understanding and appreciation of the potential benefits, it's going to be hard to put in the effort that could be required to change how you're relating with food. I speak with many people who feel like they're a bit of a fraud because they see their overeating as being about loving food so much, and they're hearing all these other people talking about the shame and the guilt that comes along with everything they eat, and they're thinking, I don't actually feel that much shame and guilt about my eating. Maybe there's some guilt around about potential health things or weight gain. If you relate to this, which is not going to be everybody, you might sometimes feel guilty that you don't feel more guilty about your eating. You hear this message out there that's saying, give yourself permission to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. And you think, great, I'll do that. But then you're seeing the effects of doing that. Maybe you're not feeling great. Maybe you're worried for your health, or you're seeing changes in your body that are causing you concern. If you love food so much, you may find that your binges are much more planned. So there can be a sense of feeling like, oh, I can't really have a problem because I'm planning my binges and I kind of want to binge, so therefore I'm different to all the other people who are binging and don't want to be binging. I want to say that your struggle is still valid. I think the question to ask, which will determine whether it's a problem or not, is does it really feel like a choice? Does it feel like something you cannot do? So if you're in the habit of binging every evening at a certain time at the end of the day when the kids go to bed, does it feel possible to have that time without using the food in that way? If there's a reaction to that, either emotional or a mental pushback, it's not really feeling like a free choice, the fact that you're eating in this way. So to answer the question, is it still a binge if it's pre-planned and you want it to happen? Yes, it still can be. And here's one of the most crucial points I want to make around this idea of loving food too much. And I'm going to pose it by way of a question so you can answer it for yourself. Is it because you love food too much? Or is it because you're afraid of how you'll feel without it? There's a difference between those two things. I was in certain habits and cycles of overeating in particular situations. And when I was doing the work around trying to let this go and to create more choice, it felt like this big empty chasm was there instead of the food. And I couldn't even conceptualize it, I couldn't even name it, and I couldn't understand what it was, which made it even more frightening. Sometimes we may overeat because the thing that we're really hungry for is not available. That could be connection or appreciation, safety, or just a particular feeling that we want. There's a hunger for it, we can't satisfy that hunger, so we reach for the food which satisfies for a moment. So it does do its job, but it's very temporary, and it sets up the cycle of needing to use it again and again. If you believe you really love food, is it love or is it like a clinging? If you love a person, but it's like you can't be without the person because of how you'll feel about yourself. It's not even about the person anymore. You're clinging to the person because being on your own is too frightening. It can look like love. It can look like wanting that person really badly, but it's not really love and appreciation for that person. The same thing can be with food. We may cling to food in certain situations, at certain times when certain feelings arise. But it's not because we love the food so much, but it's because the absence of food triggers something. And that something can be beyond words. For some people, these may go back to really early pre-verbal feeding experiences. So we just want to meet any feeling that comes up with compassion, with a desire to understand. So my first tip, if you are trying to change your relationship with food or change the way that you eat in order to have a more nourishing experience of food, one thing you can try is to set an intention on an occasion when you know you would normally eat, to go into that occasion and go, okay, I'm not going to eat until I've experienced this feeling. So you're not saying to yourself, I'm not allowed to eat tonight. We don't want to trigger off this restrictive, reactive response. But let's say it's 7 o'clock is when you sit down and you start eating. And when I say this, I'm talking about beyond meals. I'm talking about that eating on top that feels more emotional. In those moments, to take a moment and go, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes not eating when I normally would eat, just to welcome whatever arises. The food is always there. You can go to it in 5 minutes. We don't want to throw you into panic here. And the rational mind's like, why would it be panicking? But for many, that is the kind of feeling that comes up. It's like, it's a sense of not being allowed. I can't have the food. I'm going to lose something important. So you want to start noticing the thoughts, noticing the patterns that play out around food, paying attention. Sometimes I think one of the most powerful things you can do is to just set yourself an intention for a day, maybe a week, where you say, I'm not going to try and change anything about how I eat. I'm just going to pay attention. I'm just going to watch. What are my thoughts? How is my internal monologue going around food? What's my bodily, visceral, emotional experience around food? And watch without trying to force a change. It takes the pressure off, yet it's an opportunity to discover something that previously you might have been blinded to. Another thing that could be useful to consider and to remember, because the fear is if you're trying to change how you eat but you really love food, the fear is you are going to lose something important. And noticing, really realizing, experiencing the diminishing returns that happen when we eat. So if you're sitting down with a packet of cookies, that first cookie does not taste the same as the last one. The experience of eating as you go on tends to become less pleasurable. And there's nothing wrong with having pleasure in food. I think it's a really important part of eating is to try to maximize pleasure. But what people often find is the more that they eat, the less pleasure that they feel. I'm talking about in one go in this kind of compulsive way. So by paying attention to the diminishing returns when you eat, but also having permission that you can eat again. I don't want you to take any permission away from yourself because that's going to just bring up a whole other set of problems around food. But if you spot the diminishing returns, stopping, knowing you can start again, there'll be less conflict around that. You're not losing anything. If anything, you are trying to maximize your experience and your enjoyment of food. And then if you think you love food so much, how often are you eating mindlessly? We really love something, and I think if we can switch this word love, because we use it in so many different ways in the English language, and switch it to appreciation, if we can really appreciate our food, we will feel much more connected to the eating experience. We will feel more connected to ourselves when we're eating as well. Taking a moment to do the equivalent of what used to be saying grace before a meal, just a moment to appreciate this food, to marvel at all the different people and all the different things that had to happen and come together in order for this food to exist and for you to be able to have it in this moment. So if you love food, bring in more presence. I'm not talking about everything you eat has to be completely mindful, but the pausing and the paying attention and the noticing, all of this can help you feel more regulated around food and increase the enjoyment of it. And some people will say that they love food, but is it a combination? The thing that you crave, the thing that you want. So the combination could be food and television or food and a screen of some sort. And that actually to eat the food on its own in a mindful way isn't as appealing. If that's the case, then it really isn't about the food, it's about an experience that the food becomes a part of that you crave. Now let's talk about motivation. For many people who tell me that they love food, their motivation is around health and around not being happy with their weight. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, both those can be slightly problematic in terms of being motivators, because it's like, okay, I'll change the way I'm eating as long as I'm rewarded with weight loss and an improvement of health. And if I don't get those things, my motivation is just going to be gone. I'm going to feel disappointed with myself and I'm going to go back to the food. I think health is not a bad motivator, but it's when it comes from that place of fear. So like that fear for your health, I think it's a contracting feeling, fear. It's harder to be connected and open and appreciative and enjoying the experience when we're in fear about it. If you want to use health as a motivator, then do it in the really short term. So could it just be focusing on balancing your blood sugar levels? There are some great Instagram accounts that give some non-diet tips about how to balance this out. And then hopefully what you would experience is an improvement in your energy levels, and then that becomes a motivator in and of itself. That's if you want to focus on the weight thing. But my personal favourite, and one that was a big motivator for me, is that I just wanted to feel free. And I realised that when I was compulsively eating everything that I wanted, I didn't feel free. And when I was trying to control what I was eating, I didn't feel free. It's exhausting to feel like you are controlled by your desire for food. And I got to a point where I just desired to be free from that more than anything else. Because when I noticed that when I became freer around food and when I felt like I could really make choices, I just felt better in myself. I felt more aligned in myself. And that was totally worth it. And that was completely independent of any kind of physical health or physical changes. And it was motivating to focus on that because I could feel that in any moment of the day. I could get that rewarding feedback of, I'm free. So if you love food too much, but it's got to the point where it's a problem, you're not free. But if you love food and you just enjoy food and have a great time with it, that's okay. I think sometimes we can demonize this enjoyment of food, like we're almost not supposed to enjoy food too much. I'm very enthusiastic about food and I like being like that, but I do notice in certain social circles I seem to be the odd one out. Sure, they like food, but it's always served with a side of guilt. We don't have to feel guilty. But if we're not experiencing our emotions, if we're not showing up for ourselves, food may end up becoming the substitute for that. And our dependence on food in those situations might feel like love. Anyway, I think I'll draw it to a close there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.